are a jerk or you're dealing with a jerk who doesn't know how to sustain a relationship with another person. They get in love with their own wants and they can't think about what you need in order to make the team succeed. So right now, the Democratic Party does not have a communication problem. They do not have a messaging problem. It's they don't want what the American people want, because what the American people want is bad for the Democratic Party, particular bottom line of the elite. The American people want institutions of self-governance, insofar as they do want institutions of self-government. The Democratic Party, especially the elite class, does not want institutions of self-government. They don't want competitive primaries. They don't want a system that would actually allow you to dethrone Nancy Pelosi or Jim Clyburn. So the problem isn't a messaging problem. It's a problem that the Democratic elite does not want what the rank and file people want in terms of democratic self-governance. And right now, I'm coaching my daughter's middle school soccer team. One of the players was talking about the communication issue. And right now with that team, the problem isn't really a communication issue. It's the people are so freaked out when they get the ball that they, can't create their own space, which wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the people without the ball don't know how to move without the ball. So they're not creating lanes for the people with the ball. Right? So, soccer and this basketball, it's kind of simple. When you're on defense, you want to close off and clog up all lanes and swarm like bees. And when you're on offense, you want to create lanes and create passing lanes and create opportunities for the person with the ball. So it's really the person without the ball's responsibility to get open, to think about what the person with the ball, what their teammate with the ball needs, and get open and create that space. You can have a very good team that plays almost silently because the people off the ball know what the people with the ball need from them and can think in the mind of another and can put themselves in the shoes of another and think, if I had the ball and was in that position, I would want an open space. I would want a clear lane here. And then they move off the ball to the place where they should be. You can do that silently without any communication. Just with people who know how to think outside of themselves and in the shoes of another, right? But if you're always if you don't know how to be with another person, can't stay in a relationship, a personal relationship. You can't actually think about political solutions that would help people who are not you, or you can't think about what it would be for, the person with the ball who's got a lot on their mind right now, what they need from you off the ball, then no amount of talking or communication is going to solve that problem. You're just a jerk. You haven't been schooled in how to be in a relationship with anybody. All right? And because you haven't been schooled in how to be in a relationship with anybody, no amount of communication is going to solve that problem. No amount of especially in sports or even in politics or in debate where things have to happen in a moment. You could be a good team silent, doesn't say a word or only says 3 words, if everybody is thinking about what the person who has the ball needs. And it can be a well-ordered team. You see a lot of Asian soccer teams, well-ordered style of soccer without actually saying a word. It's not because they're not really good at communicating. They're really good at thinking about what the other person needs when they get the ball and knowing how to move without the ball. Whereas some players, when they don't have the ball, they just don't think. They take themselves out of the game and they're called ball watching. Right? So the Democratic Party, for example, doesn't have a messaging problem. They don't have the policies. It doesn't matter what they say because they don't have the policies, because the right policies are going to be averse to their interests. So we want to call it a messaging problem. We want to call it a problem with the gerontocracy. I might do a different episode about that. It's not the gerontocracy. The problem isn't the Democratic politicians are too old, because the younger ones with the same sensibility will just reproduce the same awful, be 30 years younger. Right? The problem is they don't have the right content. The problem isn't the message or the messenger, it's the content. The content runs averse to the bottom line of too many elites' pocketbooks or private interests. right? And the structure of the structure of our political parties might itself not be conducive to actual self-governance insofar as the parties have to sustain themselves through a relationship with donors who have an interest that is averse to democratic self-governance, right? Or large donors, and same with the media environment. So the problem isn't the communication, it's the content. And the content comes in a form, but ultimately we have to blame the content. Democrats are irrelevant because they have irrelevant content, not because they have the right message, but the wrong messenger. They have the wrong message. They have the wrong message. They don't believe in rights. They believe in conveniences, and they believe in charity. And so people are just confused about the role of government in their lives. And that's what Democrats could actually clarify. But if you want to clarify the conditions of self-governance in the United States, that means you have to undermine the conditions of Nancy Pelosi's success, of Jim Clyburn's success, of all of these company Democrats, established Democrat success, of Chuck Schumer's success. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to obfuscate, and it's going to come in the form of a messaging problem. But really, and I think George Orwell was the first person who kind of realized what's going on with the inability of Americans to write or to message correctly. And he just thought it was a cowardice, a quality of cowardice, and a quality of cowardice that made you hide under obscure language because you were scared to say what you actually thought. By the way, if you appreciate my political courage or courage in communication, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, because I make my money with my mouth. That's how I feed my family, and I do it in a quality of insight that you're not going to get anywhere for reasons of either, learning or courage. The people who know what I know aren't going to say it because they don't want to jeopardize their check, and then the people who talk the way I talk don't quite know what I know. So you get it all here, and I think you should appreciate that by going to www.funkyacademic.com and kicking in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing. To clarify, when your spouse comes to you and says, we have a communication problem, that might be he or she doesn't want to listen to what you have to say. That's not a communication problem. It's a I don't want to hear what you have to say problem, or I shouldn't have to hear what you have to say, or I expect you to agree with me problem. That's not a communication problem. That's a I expect you to agree with me problem. And that's a different issue. And if I don't agree with you, that doesn't mean you're not communicating or we're not communicating. It just means that I disagree with your content. That's not a communication problem. It's a you expect to get your way and it's coming and you can't handle not getting your way problem. That's a different problem. And we need to understand that all these things that come under the guise of communication issues, and that hack therapists will tell you it's a communication problem, or hack relationship people will tell you communication problem. And so you want to hear what you want to hear, and I'm not telling you what you want to hear. So you think the problem is the communication, but the really is your problem. The problem is your entitlement to do and hear what you want to hear and concern yourself with what you want to concern yourself with, right? Different problem. Different problem. No amount of words is going to stick that for no problem. No amount of communication is going to confuse that problem. So we need to understand that if you're a basketball player or a soccer player and you're calling for the ball behind two defenders, that's not a communication problem. That's a you don't know how to think about what the person with the ball needs. It's you being loud or being silent, whatever, behind two defenders as opposed to moving to somewhere where that will create an open lane. That's not a communication issue. That's a you don't know how to think about other people issue. Same with like the spouse, same with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party doesn't have a messaging problem. They don't need a younger, better looking messenger. They need different content because the people don't like what the Dems are cooking. I can't remember what The Rock used to say. Can you smell what The Rock is cooking? Anyway, the people don't like it. They don't like it, and they don't believe that you're true about it. So it's not a communication problem. It's a content of character problem. It's a content problem. Right? And we need to admit that that's a content problem. Now, we have problems with communication. A lot of them come from political cowardice or cowardice in general. Like I said, I referenced the George Orwell article, Politics and the English Language. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Politics in the English Language. It's a lovely article, and it's about how a lot of our unclear communication in the United States is about cowardice. We're just scared to say what we really think. And we're so scared to say what we really think, it's actually undermined our ability to think. So we don't think as well as we should because we have habits of cowardice around saying what we actually think. Right. So it's not a communication problem. It's a I don't know how to think about other people problem. And you can have better relationships with silent people if the people know how to think about the other people in the relationship rather than just be overwhelmed with their own self-absorption and self-concern. So it's not a communication problem. It's a self-absorption problem. But we think about it as a communication problem because it's just easier. We wanted some sort of story we tell ourselves about how if we use different words, the problem would go away and I wouldn't have to give up my entitlement to everyone agreeing with me or doing what I want them to do. No, the problem is you have an entitlement to everyone agreeing with you and you thinking that you should be able to do what you want to do. Once you get over that entitlement and accommodate yourself to other people, you'll be surprised how much your communication problem goes away because it was really just a you self-absorption problem, self-satisfaction problem. All right. So I hope this has been helpful for the people at home. And this is the same with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not have a messaging problem. They do not have a communication problem. They have a bad policy problem. And they're not committed to like a quality of self-governance that will, get rid of Jim Clyburn and get rid of Nancy Pelosi. So if you're not committed to a quality of democratic self-governance that will actually allow contested elections within your party, you can't go on a horse and launch a campaign against anti-democratic policies produced by the GOP. So the problem isn't the democratic messaging of the threat of Trump. It's the democratic commitment to anti-democratic policies internal to their party that makes the threat of autocracy by Trump and Musk kind of small. I'm like, well, you want us to give you power in an unrepresentative and unaccountable way, as opposed to give them power in an unrepresentative and unaccountable way. Like, I'd rather just, tend to my garden and deal with my family and let you guys work it out. And which is why the Democratic base doesn't show up the way it should. Doesn't show up to the electoral process the way it should, because it's not a messaging problem. It's a lack of integrity and lack of content problem. Right? So I hope this has been helpful. Some people will, make their nut telling you that a younger Democrat will do better, a woman Democrat will do better, or a man Democrat will do better, or some like other sort of messaging issue. But really, it's the content. It's a content. Okay, so Shayna Ellsworth says, "Hey, Amy, are you willing to cover that episode with Glenn Lowry and Amy Wax that happened a while back?" I did. All right, so I'm going to talk about this for a few minutes. There was a fascinating episode with Glenn Lowry and Amy Wax. Amy Wax and Glenn Lowry are kind of IQ hustlers. Now, IQ hustlers might be a hard way of saying this, but the kind of IQ, they believe that it tells you something about America. And well, look, Sean, if you're so excited, you need to go to www.funkyacademic and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. But I'm going to say what I think. So they believe in IQ as if like it tells you something about the quality of our nation. And IQ might be important. It may not be important. I'm sure that there are variances in memory and reaction time. And by the way, if you have a question about the constitutive elements of intelligence for a human, a lot of it comes down to memory and reaction time. So if you train your memory and you train your reaction time, even if you're not born with a natural endowment, whatever, you could fake it. It's fine. There's so much variance that comes from cultures that train memory and train reaction time with respect to intellectual cues that I'm not really a purist. But what you need in order to be a good democratic citizen is just the ability to formulate an argument. Everything you need, like a sufficient IQ to participate in our politics is and to sustain relationships, both family relationships, working relationships and political relationships is just the ability to form a sentence and sustain and appreciate an argument. If you can do that, your IQ is high enough, right? And, if you read, what's hilarious is if you read Glenn Loury's biography, he can't do that. I mean, he can't. Glenn Loury made a mess of his family life, right? So he had a hard time sustaining relationships. He made a mess of his family life, and there's nothing to do with his IQ. But if you can't think your way into sustaining your relationships, then whatever your IQ is worth, it's not worth much. Like if it doesn't help you be a good father, doesn't help you be a good spouse, a good worker, and a good politician, if you don't end up with good, it's not worth much. Even if the idea that the next highest point, we need to turn our entire economic and political apparatus to making sure that the people with 3 standard deviations above average IQs get all of the resources they want because those are the people who really matter in the world. I just don't think that that's true. I just don't think that that's true. I think the problem, and the way to advance in our society is to help people sustain better relationships. Both family relationships, working relationships, and political relationships. And that means we need to clarify the conditions of self-governance. And all of that can be done for the low IQ price of 100. So this fetishization of high IQ people is really ridiculous. And they cause problems because they have good memories and they have good reaction times, but they have inadequate content, which makes them like political liabilities, both political liabilities, family liabilities, and they don't often make the greatest parents because they're still too busy self-absorbed. And they, and also in civil societies. In civil society, there might be problems for civil society. So this whole idea that America lives on its high IQ populace, on what's good for the high IQ people is good for everyone is, first of all, anti-democratic in a relevant way, and it might not even be true. It might not even be true because everything you need to know that we don't teach, you can find here. But more importantly, it has to do with sustaining relationships, and all you need to sustain relationships is a regular memory and a regular reaction time. And we can train that to make it, above average. Notice in my podcast here, I do not speak down to people. I speak up to people, and then I expect you to go back and slow it down and to understand what I'm doing. And so depending on who you talk to, I could raise the IQ of my audience just by listening to this show. But the myth that the fate of the nation relies on the fate of its high IQ population is just that, a myth. Now, the fate of the nation does rely on character. But insofar as you have a decent memory and a decent memory and decent reaction time, you could understand the importance of character. And it's that quality of character that will make you a good, good parent, a good worker in civil society, or a business owner in civil society, and be able to help you think about political issues in an astute manner. So I'm not one of those high IQ fetishists. I don't think that the smarties will lead the revolution. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to have the best policies, or even articulate the best policies, or to enact the best policies. Right? What are my thoughts on Mensa? I think it's within a society for people who have an extraordinarily large vocabulary because they come from people with extraordinarily large vocabularies with words, with books in their houses, and yeah, I don't fetishize it. I don't fetishize the person who can recite the first 3,000 digits of pi. I think it is what it is. You need enough to be able to formulate a sentence and to hold and appreciate an argument, and so that you can participate in meaningful expressions of physical life. But the idea that that IQ solves problems, all problems in society, like belies how Glenn Lowry's high IQ did not help him become a better like parent or arguably like economist. So it actually, what Glenn Lowry has, besides having a capacious brain and a decent memory and reaction time with respect to words, is that he has an appreciation for argument, and he's oftentimes humble enough not to be so in love with his own position that he won't he won't appreciate the argument of someone who insults his character and countervailing hypothesis and reasoning. So it's his openness of mind that makes Lowry such a good thinker, not necessarily the power of his brain, the processing power. Because often, the smartest people in the world, you can't convince them of anything because they're so in love with how smart they are. And they aren't concerned about truth. They like their cushy life. They like being smart. They like their processing power. And so they're not really concerned about truth. They're concerned in self-preservation of their identity, right? So if we need to get rid of that kind of fetish in academia, I think there are entire departments that need to be like destroyed because, I think there are entire departments that need to be destroyed because of people who are not amenable to arguments. They have an ideology about like what the general discipline is and an ideology about the method to study it. And it turns out that both of them are wrong. Like, for example, psychology. I think psychology should have just been like, it should have imploded in 2005. I don't think after cognitive behavioral therapy, CBD, like it should have just, we've reached enough of that kind of psychology, and then all psychology departments should have just been folded into the humanities or philosophy. Just get rid of them because I don't think it's been doing good things for the people. And I just have problems. I have problems. So Thomas Sowell, he understood that there are cultural deficiencies, and we need to think about cultural deficiencies. Do I agree with him about everything? No, but we need to start looking at cultural deficiencies, like the etiology, where the cultural deficiencies come from. Sowell and I are going to disagree. With respect to Amy Wax, well, she's a Jew who loves the idea that Jews are just smarter than everybody else. I think it's a little bit more complicated with that. I have a lot of respect for the Jewish culture. I think they do a lot right. I've had other shows on why the black people need a black Haggadah. The Haggadah is the story that Jews tell themselves about themselves, that tell them who they are, who their enemies are, what they have to do to defeat their enemies, and what it means to be a part of this community and not that community. I think black people need an equivalent of a black Haggadah. I need a black Haggadah because right now our identity is externally determined by given features like melanin as opposed to spiritually determined by our consciousness and awareness of ourselves. And what a Haggadah does is tell Jews spiritually, not phenotypically, spiritually, who they are and who they're not and why they are who they are and what it means to be part of their community. We don't have that. The NOI has that. The Nation of Islam has that, which I think is actually a good thing for the Nation of Islam. But I've talked about that on a different show. So thank you for your time. Be very careful of people saying, well, we have communication problems. We have communication problems because what's often the case is that it's not a communication problem. It's a I don't know how to think about other people problem. It's a I feel entitled to only concern myself with myself problem. And it gets masked and overdiagnosed as a communication problem. The Dems do not have, the Democratic Party that is, do not have a messaging problem. They have a message problem. Like they have a content problem. They do not believe in the right things because their policies are compromised by their fidelity to their donor class. Their fidelity to their donor class. And so they do not have the right message. They do not believe in the right policies and the right democratic practices. So no amount of messaging can put lipstick on that pig, as they say. And that's the same thing with your sports team, who can't figure out how to move the ball and thinks it's a communication problem, when really the people off the ball don't know how to think about what the person on the ball needs. And you can have a very good sports team that's almost silent because the people off the ball know what the people on the ball need and move and accommodate the person on the ball in a helpful way. So you have a knowledge problem. You have a knowledge problem and a concern problem that masks itself as a communications problem. People don't know what to be and what to do, and no amount of talking about what they want is going to clarify that situation. All right. Thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, which I think you should, go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep doing it. This is, how I feed my family, and you guys have been okay to me. And if we get a little bit better, then everything kind of grows, both in the Osei-Frimpong household and in the Funky Academic atmosphere. And what I want you to do is not squander your life thinking that communication problems, thinking that like jerk problems or a-hole problems or conflict of interest problems are actually communication problems. Because you will beat your head up against the wall. Why isn't this person listening to me? Why do they think that I don't understand them when they're trying to put a knife in my back? The problem is the knife in your back, not the person who's putting the knife in your back. The words the person putting the knife in your back is saying. Someone asked, how's soccer going? It's actually good. It's good. My girls, I'm coaching my daughter's junior high school team. My girls, all last year, they just lost all the games by a ton. I didn't know about this. My daughter was in 5th grade. Middle school starts in 6th grade. So now she's in 6th grade, and, they ran off their coach, and the coaching position was open, but it turns out that a lot of people don't like coaching girls sports because dealing with girls in sports is kind of hard if they don't have the right culture. And so I'm trying to institute the right culture, and the culture is fundamentals. I play very boring practices that lead a revolt, and they were about to lead a revolt until we won our first game because of my very, very boring practices. And my very, very boring practices are fundamental driven. Like if it were up to the girls, all they would do is scrimmage and shoot. They would have a practice that was just scrimmaging and shooting. And we do none of that in the practices that I do. And we don't do running either. So like we don't do scrimmaging, we don't do shooting, we don't do running. All we do is like ball mastery and dribbling drills. Because if you can't dribble and you're scared of the ball coming to you, then it doesn't really matter. And if I were teaching basketball, we would do a whole lot of like layup drills. There would be a lot of layup drills, dribbling drills, because it's hard to dribble and run and bounce a ball at the same time, just like it's hard in soccer. And we would do a whole lot of, there would just be a lot of dribbling drills and catching drills. If you can't trap in soccer, that's the equivalent of not being able to, if you can't trap in soccer, it's the equivalent of not being able to catch in basketball. Everything else you do is kind of a waste of time because the players are going to be scared of catching the ball. So first touch. Like we do a lot of first touch drills. We do a lot of that. We do an hour of that and then I send them home. That's not true. We only do like 45 minutes. We do a lot of one-on-ones too, but nothing really bigger because I think it's stupid to teach passing if people don't feel comfortable with their first touch. Because if they don't feel comfortable with their first touch, it means they can't receive a pass anyway. So we do a lot of like ball mastery and first touch drills. And what we don't do is shooting and scrimmaging, full feet scrimmaging. Because if you can't trap, if you don't have a good first touch and you can't dribble around cones, have like a few basic skill moves, then you're not going to be able to get to a place where you can actually make an open pass anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So, and I think the same is good with basketball. I like having basketball players on my soccer team because the girls basketball players, at least they know how to box out and rebound. And if you can box out and rebound, you can kind of have an understanding of soccer and I can teach you the rest. And L drags and behind the backs are kind of the similar sensibilities. So like ex-basketball players, people who like play basketball, I can teach them soccer. I think so. But yeah, that's how it's going. I'm curious about the last 2 games and tournament. How we do. Because if we win it all, if we win it all, I think they might give me keys to the whole school. I will bring glory to my little girls junior high school who's used to getting beaten in all things by the other junior high schools. GTX in London says, we definitely need more men like you in our community. This is one of the reasons why I do this show, because I want to teach both people and people with sons, both men and, women with sons, how to be like me. Because I too believe that we need more men like me in this community. But I'm also hard on girls. I'm hard on these 12-year-old girls are not used to being talked to the way I talk to them. They're also not used to learning content the way I'm teaching them content, especially around sports. So, yeah. I think I don't handle the girls with kitty gloves, and I'm hard on fundamentals. Like I said, we don't do a lot of extra running, but we do a lot of tedious work on first touches and trapping and dribbling around cones and more cone drills and more skill work. A lot of boring work that doesn't make you popular and doesn't make you liked, but it just makes you a better player. Yeah. So that's where I am right now. And I'm going to talk about something different. Have any parents stepped to you? So no parents have stepped to me. I think a parent would have, but then we won. And then after we won, they kind of keep their yap shut because the team has never won anything. So no parent, and a lot of parents are really grateful because I'm actually teaching their girls skills. So you have a lot of girls who some have played a handful have played club ball, and then some have played no soccer, and then some are other athletes, and nobody, and they're all bad except for 1 or 2 players. They're all bad because nobody actually, even on their club team, the club team that just kind of took their money, they didn't actually work drills with them. They didn't actually work drills with them, and they didn't actually build skills. And if you're not going to build fundamental skills, all the years of club and all the games are just not going to do it because it's about building skills. I am going to give, this reminds me, I will do a show and I'm going to give the parents a talk maybe at the end of this season or definitely beginning of next season about how we need to think about the Suzuki method with respect to sports, youth sports and youth activities in general. And I say the Suzuki method because Suzuki is a violin teacher who is very clear that you need the parent, you need the teacher, and you need the student, and you have a triangle. And it only works with the triangle. Because right now, parents put their kids in sports and assume that the sports league will teach them and develop their kids' skills. And I will tell you that the sports league will not develop your kids' skills. The sports league will act as a multiplier for what you do at home. I'm a little better than most, but even I would be better served multiplying what you do at home. So I will tell you clearly what you do at home for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then if you come here, I could 10x whatever time you're putting in at home. You'll get that much more out of it. But if you don't put anything into it, I can't give you anything out of it. Or what I'll give you is going to be minuscule. So the Suzuki method, they know that and understand that. And so they expect parents to put a lot of time in at home, and then you come for the lesson, and the lesson kind of multiplies that. But we don't think about that, especially liberals don't think about that with respect to sports. Conservatives get this in a little bit better way, but liberals, especially girls, they don't understand that. Moms don't understand that you can't just put your kid in a league and then expect the league to teach them stuff. That was a hard lesson that a lot of moms didn't get. We don't tell that. We don't tell moms that. We don't tell liberal moms that. No, if you want your kid to actually grow, you need to work with them at home. Not a lot, but you need to work with them on fundamentals. And then that'll grow. And then when you bring them to me, I can grow it at practice. But you work with them for 10, 15 minutes at home every day, maybe 45 minutes on a weekend, and then bring them to practice, we're good. We're good. Your kid's going to be great. Not even good, great. Because then they'll learn how to work on their own and everything. They'll get skills. And if they get skills, they'll be more excited to work. But if you don't think you need to work with them at home and you just bring them to me, the growth is going to be minimal. A lot of people are not going to admit that, but what they're going to do is take your money, and then like it's not gonna matter. All right. Thank you for your time. I'm going to go now because I have other work to do, and I will see you at a different time with a different show. Peace.